run for office because they need a job. And we need more people who run for office because they care about making a difference. And so somebody like you who's still here talking and doing that says something. So first of all, hats off to you. The other thing I just want to say, I'll say one thing, by the way, Ro Cano's my law school roommate, a very close friend of mine. I was talking to him on the way up here. And, he was on my podcast talking about this proposal. One thing I will say about the vouchers point is, one of the problems is people don't know they have it, they don't know what it is. So it's like a really hard thing to get off the ground, because like if you tell everyone they got $50, most people don't even care about politics or pay any attention. So you really, it's going to require, I think, some transition to get to a point where candidates know how to educate people about the voucher and get it, and educate the public and so on and so forth. Okay, who is in the back? There's some people in the back. I saw this. You sir? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
One of the things we would like to see in voting is that everybody gets a chance to vote for the people that they like the best.
Sure.
We are unfortunately saddled with a two-party system, and the two-party system builds into it a number of little factors that make it stay a two-party system, such as the fact that as a candidate I had to gather 500 signatures to run for in a Democratic primary.
Sure.
For state's representative. Meanwhile, persons from other parties besides the big two had to gather 10,000 or so signatures in order to be able to be allowed on the same ballot. This is just incredibly unfair, and we need to get more people, and then more parties represented, and then have changed the elections to something where we have rank order voting, so that we can actually have the winner be the person who represents the most people.
All right, so let me address a bunch of the topics. It's hard to summarize all of what you said, but let me try to work through I'd say a few different topics that you raised. Let me start with the last one, rank order voting. That actually exists in the state of Maine. There was a big controversy over that because the congressional seat, literally, that made the difference, rank order voting, and the Democrat winning that seat, and the governor was Republican. Outgoing governor was very upset about that. Famously, when he signed, I think, the appointment, he put stolen election or something like that on. I wrote it next to the signature. It's a great system by which voters can rank their choice. So, for example, let's say in the primary here, you could say, okay, well, I like, whether it's if you like one candidate, you have a very strong opinion in the three. I really want to vote for Biss, but if he's not going to win, I really want Pritzker over Kennedy or Kennedy over Pritzker or whatever. I'm just using that because there's three names there. You can rank them, and so this way it knows that if your first choice gets thrown out, you can go to your second choice and so on. Okay, that is a better system. There's a lot of political scientists who will explain why. There's a lot of scholarly papers about it. Whether it catches on or not, I don't know. I didn't bring it up here because, frankly, as it was, I had so much that I was trying to cover in one session. So, but I think that's a valid thing that I think that we should talk about. Another thing you talked about that I actually debated talking about here was ballot access, which is essentially part of the topic you were talking about. Now, one thing you kind of threw in with that is this two-party system. I do think our system of government is such in the United States with the first past the post system that you're going to effectively have a two-party system. That's my belief, but you're entitled to an opposing view. But ballot access is a different point, okay? Which is essentially, we have requirements in the state of Illinois for all sorts of signatures that you need to get in order to get on the ballot. And I will tell you, as somebody who got on the ballot statewide, there's a lot of BS that goes into getting on the ballot, right? You need all these signatures. They need to be verified. They need to have the same address. The person not only has to put down their current address, but it also has to be the address they're registered with. And you've got to figure that out. So just to be clear, not only are candidates often paying people lots of money to go out and get tons of signatures, but there's a whole cottage industry. There's software that's created to analyze the signatures and automatically detect what signatures aren't good and whether they match the addresses. And there's this whole gamesmanship about trying to knock other people off the ballot. There's all of that stuff that goes on. So I've heard arguments both ways, and I'll try to present both sides of the argument, and you can decide for yourselves. The people who support that sort of system say that it requires a certain amount of effort and organization to get on the ballot. And that's valuable because we want our candidates to do that. And if you made it easier, then you'd have every, I say Tom, Dick, and Harry, but those are all men, but every person, random person in the street could get on the ballot. And then on the other side, what people I think point out is that it favors folks who are in with the established party because they have, are kind of an organization that makes it easier. One thing I will note is that the system, the way it's set up, we have our primaries when it's really cold outside. It's not clear to me why we need to be doing that. We could have them a little later, like most states do. So it's a little warmer, more people vote. It's easier to get those, get people to the polls, but also gives you more time to get signatures and so on. So there's a lot of things that we could do to make ballot access easier. I've tried to be pretty straight up with you in my own views. If it's my own view, I'm more towards the side of giving more access to people, making it easier to get on the ballot rather than less. But I'm trying to present all the sides to you because frankly, I don't really have a horse in the race on that. Okay, any other comments? You got Elizabeth again? She's so informed.
I thought you were going to talk about e-sign.
Okay, talk about it. Okay.
Well, David Orr, former Cook County clerk, is really pushing heavily. Again, Kelly Cassidy introduced a bill for him last session, and she's going to introduce it again this session. The Better Government Association is going to be supporting this, and I'm sure Reform for Illinois. I'm trying to get the league to support it.
Slower and so they can hear too.
There's going to be a lot of push this session in the General Assembly for a system called e-sign. It's currently used in Washington, D.C. and Denver. And it's a system whereby people, when they're candidates, or whoever is going out and collecting signatures for candidates' petitions, you collect the signature on a tablet, and that person signs in real time. You can confirm their voter registration, you can confirm the address that they live at, and basically the only way an e-sign signature can get kicked off a petition is if somebody forges it. You can't get kicked off because you were at the wrong address, or you weren't a registered voter, or you were at an address outside of that jurisdiction where that candidate is running. So the error rate, I believe, in Denver was like 97%. 97% of signatures that got turned in were ruled valid. And right now, I think in Illinois, it's like 50%. So,
you'd be surprised that, sometimes it can be even lower. It's very hard to get them lined up. It also, by the way, I would say it has a racial impact and a disparate impact. In other words, if you're gathering signatures in an area that people are more transient, they move more often, then you have more issues with your address, right? Not matching up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
And you can, I'm pretty sure you can register people to vote at the same time, but then they can't sign your petition. But David Orr is really pushing this plan. He's got a new organization called Good Government Illinois, I think it's called. And that's going to, to me, that's a no-brainer. I think if there's one reform that the people of Illinois should be able to get through this session, it should be that, because it's just such a no-brainer. It's going to put all these it's going to put, what is his name, Mark Casper? Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll put him out of business, but everybody else should be for it. There's a couple other parts of David Orr's plan, like it would lower the signature requirement for mayoral candidates in Chicago from 12,500 signatures to 5,000 signatures, which is what you have to get for statewide office right now. You need 2.5 times that to be mayor of Chicago. But all your signatures are going to be good to begin with if you have e-signs, so you don't need to get double the number of signatures anymore.
Right, it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's very hard to see opposition to it on a principled basis, although, because the system now, I would say, helps insiders or people who are more organized, connected, and so forth. But one thing I will say is it doesn't necessarily, that part of it with the city of Chicago lowers the bar, but it still makes it, and certainly you don't have to get twice as the number, and it makes it easier, but still, it can be a daunting thing for somebody to get these thousands of signatures. It doesn't completely answer, let's say, his issue, which is like, well, hey, I want to get on the ballot and I need 10,000 signatures.
Well, you should have to pass some kind of threshold.
Well, there you go. That's what I try to present both sides. Whatever the issue, whatever the side is on it. Yeah, I don't have a dog in the fight on it. I'm just noting that for the record. Okay. Yeah, you and then.
The point about the threshold is that the only reason I say it's probably the reason why there's a difference in thresholds. One is to get on, if you're an independent candidate, you'd be getting on the final ballot.
Sure.
Whereas when you're doing a primary, the primary, you're not getting on a final ballot, you still have to raise money, and you got 6 months to get, and all that. So the argument to the people who are raising money for the primary, or raising, not money, but the signatures for the primaries, I did all this stuff, I had to raise money, had to run. You show up with 10,000 votes saying I'm an independent, and then you're on the ballot. So that may be the argument they're gonna use.
I would say too, I think that's fair. I would say actually, from what I've heard, there's been some grousing about making it harder for independent candidates or third-party candidates to get on the ballot, because there's arguments that people recruit sort of like a Trojan horse person to be in there. I mean, there's a lot of, Bruce Rauner and a lot of the Republicans were very upset because their view is that the conservative party, or whatever the heck the name of the Illinois Conservative something party, candidate was essentially a Trojan horse that we put up, we the Democrats, as I'm assuming most of you Democrats, put up to sort of siphon votes off from Rauner. We don't want to necessarily have a system where you have an incentive for people to put these candidates that are, their whole purpose is to siphon 3% or 5%.
I don't think it would have made a difference.
Clearly not. Clearly not. But my point is just that
Dirty pool.
what I try to do is, it's like, it doesn't matter what, that's why I used the example of my race with the guy who got destroyed, but he got $1 million anyway. The point is not necessarily whether it mattered, but it might in a future race, right? I remember when Al Gore lost in 2000, and I was so incensed at the time of Ralph Nader, because from my perspective, so much rode on that victory, and literally, 500 votes in Florida, right?
It's 5-4.
504, you said?
5-4. The vote was 5.
Oh yeah, you're joking in the Supreme Court. I mean, but the point I'm trying to make is 500 something votes. There's tens of thousands of votes that went to Nader in Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because of what happened on our last election here locally, here in this room, where we had to take people and transport them to another location to vote. And there were a lot of young, black, other people of color who were standing in line for hours to place their first vote or their second vote, and it was very ugly. So I think that there needs to be some kind of guideline for either from the federal level or something like that. I mean, we can still say, oh, well, the counties can take care of it, but they need to follow certain basic guidelines that do not suppress these votes. Because all of that, I heard people, when I was transporting them, these young people saying, geez, I'm never, I don't want to do that again. It just sunk my heart, because that is our people. We've got people out there who are the ones in power want to suppress their vote, and that's how they win, right? So we've got people who are discouraged then. At the basic level, they are discouraged from coming out. They're like, well, our votes don't matter. They don't want our votes. We're not part of them, right? So it's at that level. What I saw here on election day, that was so disgusting. And then for us to run out of ballots in that situation, it was really disheartening.
So I'm trying to summarize what you said, but frankly, I hope you all heard it because it was worth listening to. Essentially, what she's talking about is how unacceptable it was that we had the problems that we had here in this room on election day, right? Where we literally had kids, many of whom were students of color who were voting for the first time and were, frustrated because they essentially had to spend hours waiting for an opportunity to do something that many of us take for granted and did were able to get through our line very quickly. And the ultimate result is, it's not only that a lot of those kids may not vote in the future, but more importantly, that people use that as a tool to discourage voting. So I think what her point was, I'm trying to summarize so everyone hears. Yeah, and I think her point was that we should have some sort of standards to ensure that, for example, lines aren't too long, or that people have an opportunity to vote. I will say, this is something that's come up a lot in other parts of the country, because there have been issues, as you, I'm sure, have been aware, in many states. I mean, I use Georgia as an example because that was so recent, and there it wasn't just long lines, and they closed a lot of polling centers in African American areas, but not in white areas, but also purging names off the voter rolls, which is an issue I haven't gotten a cross check or talked about all that here, but certainly the voter purges in Georgia were really controversial because a lot, it was largely targeting African American names. So, yeah, I mean, it would be good. I think it would make a lot of sense to have guidelines to try to make it difficult. It's never you can't make it impossible to have voter suppression, but to make it very difficult to suppress votes.
One more thing on that note, we did have 2 women who were from the Attorney General's office come in the last 30 to 45 minutes that came and walked through and observed. Now, I don't know what they did with what they saw. By the time they got here, the lines were down considerably, but there were students that were standing for a long time because the judges that were in here couldn't process them fast enough, and they had 5 or 6 judges, but it was not enough. So,
Well, I will just say to you, look, I mean, I raised, so I'm on the Attorney General's Transition Committee. I raised a lot of these issues in that meeting, and I'm involved in some of the hiring that we're doing for some of the senior people, so I will talk to some of them about it. The reason that I think what I'm talking about with all of you is what I'll call structural change, is because you can't rely on having the right person in the Attorney General's office. So I think the AG does have a role, and it's something I can actually directly have some influence on. But what I want to try to do is create a system so in 14 years, when we're, let's say, maybe in the minority, who knows what happens, that the system works for everybody. And we have, and that's hopefully some of the reforms we're talking about will do that. But I agree with you that it would. One thing I would love to see is nationwide something on voter suppression. And there may have been a provision in HR 1. I don't remember. Yeah, I think there are, right? I think that was a topic that was addressed in HR 1, which is the House bill, which is going to go nowhere in the Senate. Okay, I'm just making that clear because we're being real here today. So anyway, it's something I think I agree with you. Yeah.
I don't know about here, so my question is, what opportunities are there for students here for early voting? Because I vote early and I just walk in and I have every proof to myself. Do the students have early voting opportunities?
Absolutely.
yes.
They had the early voting open for the same number of weeks that they had early voting in other places in the county. And what students were saying, those who decided to vote about 5 days before election day, was that those 5 days leading up to election day, there were long lines too. And so all of them were coming back saying, oh, you know what, we'll go later when the line dies down. And the line never died down.
I will say I early voted in Cook County, where I live, and the line was extremely long. I mean, I waited for a long time, and it was not close to, it wasn't like the day before election day.
I early voted in this room.
Mm-hmm.
First, in our county, it starts at our county office, and the very first amount of voting happens there. Because it's a little confusing what's early voting, what's absentee voting, and so I don't want to get into all the wheres and why-fors, but it's a process. It starts at the county, and then it spreads to a few, and then on election day, it goes to a much wider. And when I came in and I saw that elevator did not work, I marched straight in here to the judge and complained about it. There was no signage, there was nothing at that point in time except a sandwich board outside this door.
Mm-hmm.
And I started complaining about it on that day, and obviously it fell on deaf ears. But that was something that I saw as a problem, and I was calling people and trying to get people to understand that even if we didn't have a crush of people, that getting here was a problem. And then when you add the crush of people to it that go on for days on end, obviously this room isn't adequate.
I would just say, I mean, one thing I do want to say, sort of, as we're talking about this, is because this has sort of been in some ways a negative talk, because we're talking about all these problems and issues to solve. One thing I will just say is we should all feel fortunate that we're in a state where early voting is something that we encourage and that is available, where we make voter registration much easier. There are a lot of states, I was talking about these other states where they're really trying to suppress the vote, places like Georgia where they're making it harder and harder for people to vote, harder and harder for them to register. So we are moving in the right direction. We're in a fortunate position to be able to do even more, and I think that's, I mean, what happened here is a great example of, in some ways, we're a victim of our own success, right? We got a lot of people out to vote, which is a good thing. And in some ways, because it can be negative, we can be too negative, I want to celebrate that in its own sense. It's wonderful we have so many kids who wanted to vote, but we just got to do something about it. Anybody else? Oh, well, okay, yeah.
I just wanted to mention, piggyback about
the lack of ballots, how can we prevent that? And my idea would be just to get the count of how many people that are in the county at least, and just have enough staff, just say it, versus having to just, wait to see who's gonna come and vote, versus,
Keisha, the issue with that is there's a cost, and they don't have the fund. And I'm on the county board, for anybody that doesn't know. Paul and I and Jim are on the county board along with Keisha, she's brand new, and we run into a funding issue. So just to let you know.
By the way, it's so great that we have like elected representatives here. That's pretty neat, right? Yeah.
Paper
The
ballots.
county clerk has no incentive to fix the problem, because what he said the day after election day was a straight up lie in the paper. He stated that DeKalb County was the only county that allowed same-day registration for students. This is what he said in the paper, which is completely not true.
And Carolyn ran against him and did
Yes,
not
our
win.
candidate, clerk and recorder, came within 4 points of
But
the winner.
the fundamental problem there is the lack of transparency. Nobody
Right.
knows. I know that he has voting machines in his office that don't have complete accountability. We've heard these sort of things from election judges. And so, yeah, we need a centralized, like an oversight of some sort, maybe at the federal level, where things are being checked on, because he's got this voting machine hiding in his office in the corner and no accountability with it. He is
Thank
the
you, by the
only
way.
one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I was just gonna say thank you for running. We're fortunate to have you here. I mean, frankly, one thing is this can be, by the way, for all of us complaining about how things were in the last election, what we can do for next time is we can get her or somebody like you elected in, the next time, right? I mean, I think we're, as a party, just to take off, put a different hat on for a second, we're making huge strides, and one thing we can be thankful about, having a billionaire at the top of the ballot, is there's a lot of money spent to get out the vote efforts, which help build the party for the long term, and I think, hopefully we can get you or whoever is gonna end up being the nominee here for clerk next time. But I agree with you about standards. The hard thing is nationally, and I know we probably have to wrap
Yeah,
up.
we are coming up on.
Oh, yeah, we're coming up. Nationally,
point
it's
break.
really hard because the Republicans, don't have the same view on voter suppression because they want to use it as a tool to reduce. The issue for theirs, many of their voters are older white people, and so they vote and they're very motivated to vote, and they are often have the means to do it, and they're in certain neighborhoods, so they want to use that as a tool. Right, to suppress voting amongst people who don't vote their way. But in Illinois, at the very least, because we all have a power to change it, a lot of decision makers in DeKalb County here, we can at least try to build and try to move towards some of that. You have one comment before I go, or one of you ladies before you go?
I just had a comment. I was at the office and I believe Scott got a call that there was some friction going on at one of the voting sites. And I said, can I go? Because I wanted to see, I've only been at the receiving end of the ballots, not the election judging. And when I got there, I was taken aback by how our election judges, and I don't care what party you're in, was treating our voters. I had gotten the story that it was several people there that was deterring people from voting and was being really nasty, and one lady took a ballot and snatched it from the girl where it's in the envelope and you're supposed to. Now, my understanding, election judge is not to touch the ballot, but she took the ballot, looked at it, and then put it in the machine. And that would have stopped me. Had I been the voter, the DeKalb police would have been there. And I'm an alderman in Sycamore. The DeKalb police would have been there. Because I'd have stopped her dead in her tracks and said, excuse me, you have no right to look at my ballot. I don't give a darn who you are and what party you represent. I have a right to cast this vote in a secret ballot. That's why you have the little bitty boxes. And for this woman felt very dejected. Then you had judges fighting against one another. I'm sitting there observing this, and I saw a judge saying, come on in, hi, how are you? Being very warm and welcoming.
Mhm.
There were Hispanic people coming in who had never voted, did not know that they had needed all this identification. She talked to them. She walked them through it. It was a former counselor who was one of the judges. He was awesome. He stopped, sat them down, walked them through it, told them you need to go home and get this, this, and this. And when you come back, I'll be right here to help you fill it out. And he helped them. I saw that. It made me very proud. But then I saw the ugliness too. And how can we train our judges to be bipartisan? I don't care who, if they could be in the party of Mickey Mouse. It doesn't matter. If a person comes in and wants to cast their ballot, I take it very seriously. And I have voted since the age of 18. I'm not going to tell you how old I am now. But I'm very proud 64-year-old woman, and I voted every election since the age of 18. Because my father was an uneducated black man from Mississippi who came to Illinois to better himself. And he took me with him as a knee baby to those election sites. And he taught me not necessarily vote for the party, but vote for the person. Read about that person, read about their platform. If you're in alignment with what their line is thinking, then that's the person you need to vote for. Because I asked him, I said, Daddy, are we donkeys or are we elephants? And he said, baby, we're neither. I am a man. And that let me know that he said people died for me to have the right to vote. And I take it very seriously. I think it's a shame and a disgrace that we have election judges bickering with one another in front of the voters. This does not go well with the public. We had a young lady came, she was at the wrong polling place. We called Scott, Scott got on his phone right away and da-da-da. You need to be down in Westminster Church. She was so grateful. She said, the devil is a lie. I am voting today. She was not going to let that deter her. But some of the other women, they just, well, you can't vote here. And they were no help at all. Now, right is right and wrong is wrong. We can't get this mess right. This is why we got orange heads sitting in the office right now. Because when you fight against each other, that gives the opposition more pull. And that's exactly what happened. And I don't ever want to see that happen again in another polling place. I prefer to be on the end where I'm having fun and receiving the ballots and counting how many did you have. But that also brings up another question. When they brought their stuff in, because I'm a tally judge, there was no one there, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's supposed to be someone there representing the red, someone there representing the blue. It was only the red. There was no blue. And I felt that because of the bickering going on, they just said, you know, blanket, I'm gonna just let them have it, have at it. And I think that was wrong. And when you see that there's that kind of distension, you know, it just.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, if everyone took their right to vote as seriously as you do, we'd be a better country.